The smell hits first. Bay rum aftershave mixing with the metallic tang of blood. Albert Anastasia lies sprawled across the black and white tiled floor, his body twisted in a position no living man could hold. 10 bullet wounds perforate his torso, neck, and skull. 10 shots fired in approximately 13 seconds by 2 men who walked in through the front door, like customers, then walked out the same way while their target bled out among scattered towels and shattered mirrors. The barber, Joseph Bocchino, crouches behind his station, hands shaking so violently he can barely hold the telephone receiver as he calls for help. The chair where Anastasia had been sitting moments ago, getting his regular Friday morning shave, same time he'd been coming for 3 years, is overturned, its leather upholstery soaked dark red. The white barber's cloth that had been draped across Anastasia's chest lies crumpled in the corner, punctured by exit wounds. Outside on 7th Avenue, hundreds of people walk past the hotel entrance, completely unaware that one of America's most powerful crime bosses has just been executed in broad daylight, in a luxury hotel in the heart of Manhattan. The killers have already disappeared into the morning crowds. The getaway car is 3 blocks away and moving farther every second. And 3 miles south in a Little Italy social club, Carlo Gambino is accepting congratulations from captains who understand exactly what just happened. The Anastasia family has a new boss, and he didn't get the position by asking politely. This wasn't just murder. This was a corporate takeover executed with bullets instead of boardroom votes. 10 shots that transformed the American Mafia's power structure, that validated 5 years of patient political maneuvering, that proved the old rules, don't kill a boss without commission approval, could be bent if you had enough allies and the target had made enough enemies. But here's what makes this particular assassination different from the hundreds of other mob hits that littered New York's streets in the 1950s. Nobody wanted to solve it. Not the police, who'd been trying to build cases against Anastasia for decades and were quietly relieved someone else had handled the problem. Not the FBI, who saw the murder as evidence that organized crime was self-destructing without federal intervention. And certainly not the Mafia's commission, who'd given their tacit approval for the hit weeks earlier, understanding that Albert Anastasia had become too dangerous, too unpredictable, too likely to bring federal heat down on all 5 families. The question that should have dominated the investigation, who ordered the hit, had an answer everyone already knew. Carlo Gambino, the quiet underboss who'd spent 5 years building alliances while his boss made enemies, had orchestrated every detail. The only mystery was how he'd managed to convince the commission that killing a boss was necessary, justified, and in everyone's best interest. 5 years earlier, April 1951, when Vincent Mangano disappeared on April 19, 1951, his body never to be found, everyone in New York's underworld understood what had happened. Albert Anastasia, Mangano's underboss, had killed him. The fact that Mangano's brother Philip turned up, shot to death in Jamaica Bay 3 days later, removed any doubt. Anastasia had eliminated both Mangano brothers, declared himself the new boss, and dared anyone to challenge his version of events. The commission, the 5-family governing body created by Lucky Luciano in 1931, faced an impossible choice. Technically, killing a boss without permission violated the most fundamental rule of Mafia governance. But challenging Anastasia meant war, and Anastasia had Murder Incorporated's reputation behind him. Over 60 murders attributed to him personally, hundreds more he'd ordered as one of organized crime's most feared enforcers. Nobody wanted that fight. So the commission accepted Anastasia's transparent lie that Mangano had retired and officially recognized him as the new boss. But Carlo Gambino, who'd been Mangano's underboss and automatically became Anastasia's second-in-command, never forgot the violation. He was 50 years old, Sicilian-born, soft-spoken, and easy to underestimate. While Anastasia cultivated fear and headlines, Gambino cultivated relationships. He understood something Anastasia didn't. In the modern mafia, political alliances mattered more than body count. The days of ruling through pure intimidation were ending. The commission needed bosses who could be diplomatic, who could negotiate disputes without resorting to immediate violence, who understood that federal attention was the real enemy. Gambino spent 5 years building his case. He maintained friendships with other underbosses, particularly Vito Genovese, who had his own ambitions to become boss of the Luciano family. He attended commission meetings as Anastasia's representative, always reasonable, always calm, always positioning himself as the adult in the room, while Anastasia made enemies through reckless behavior. Because Anastasia was reckless. He'd muscled into Meyer Lansky's Cuba casino operations without permission, violating agreements that had governed mob cooperation in Havana for years. He'd ordered hits without commission approval, including several that targeted civilians who'd merely insulted him. He'd been openly discussing expanding into narcotics trafficking, despite the commission's ban on drug dealing, which existed because narcotics convictions carried mandatory minimums that incentivized cooperation with prosecutors. Most damningly, Anastasia had allegedly been selling Mafia memberships, making men for money, rather than for the traditional reasons of loyalty and capability. This violated every principle the organization was supposedly built on. Several commission members were outraged when they learned about it, viewing it as the ultimate corruption of Cosa Nostra's traditions. Gambino cataloged each offense, filed them away mentally, waited for the right moment to present his case. That moment came in 1957, after a sequence of events that destabilized New York's underworld and created the perfect opportunity for a leadership change. The setup, 1956 to 1957. Frank Costello's shooting in May 1957 demonstrated that even the most powerful boss could be removed through intimidation rather than murder. Vito Genovese had ordered Vincent, the Chin Gigante, to kill Costello, but the attempt only grazed Costello's skull. Miraculously, Costello survived and chose to retire rather than fight a war he might lose. The commission accepted this peaceful transition, grateful to avoid bloodshed. Gambino watched these events with calculating interest. Genovese had just proven you could force a boss out without killing him, which meant the commission was willing to accept leadership changes if they prevented violence. More importantly, Genovese now owed political debts to commission members who'd facilitated Costello's retirement. Those debts could be leveraged. Gambino approached Genovese through intermediaries, proposing a partnership. Anastasia was becoming a liability. Too violent, too unpredictable, too likely to attract federal attention. If Anastasia were removed, Gambino would support Genovese's leadership, and the two of them could dominate New York's underworld together. Genovese agreed, with one critical condition. The hit needed commission approval. They couldn't just kill Anastasia and expect the other families to accept it. They needed to build a case that Anastasia's removal was necessary for organizational stability, that his death would benefit everyone, that this was justice rather than a power grab. The case practically built itself. Anastasia's recklessness had created enemies across multiple families. Meyer Lansky was furious about the Cuba interference. Joe Profazzi and Tommy Lucchese had both been disrespected by Anastasia at commission meetings. Joe Bonanno, the most traditionalist of the bosses, was outraged by the membership-selling allegations. Gambino and Genovese presented their case to the commission in a series of private meetings during summer 1957. Anastasia had violated multiple organizational rules. His behavior was attracting federal attention. His mental state seemed increasingly unstable, the kind of liability that could bring down all 5 families if left unchecked. The commission discussed, debated, and ultimately reached consensus. Albert Anastasia would be killed. Carlo Gambino would succeed him as boss. The hit would be sanctioned, official, carried out with the commission's blessing. The only requirements: make it clean, make it public enough to send a message, and ensure Anastasia's loyalists understood this wasn't a rogue operation, but official Mafia business. The authorization was granted in September 1957. Gambino had 2 months to plan the execution. The planning, September to October 1957. Finding the right moment to kill Albert, Anastasia required understanding his routines, his vulnerabilities, his moments of exposure. Gambino had been Anastasia's underboss for 6 years, which meant he knew every detail of the boss's schedule, security arrangements, and habits. Anastasia's fortress was his home in Fort Lee, New Jersey, heavily guarded, difficult to approach, surrounded by loyal soldiers. His social clubs in Brooklyn were similarly protected. But every Friday morning at 10 a.m., Anastasia went to the Park Sheraton Hotel barbershop for a shave and haircut. Same barber, same chair, same routine maintained for 3 years. The barbershop was public, accessible to anyone walking through the hotel lobby. Anastasia's bodyguard usually accompanied him, but often stepped outside during the actual haircut, giving his boss privacy for what should have been a safe, mundane ritual. It was the perfect vulnerability in an otherwise well-protected life. The hit team required careful selection. Gambino couldn't use soldiers from his own crew. That would make his involvement too obvious. Instead, he reached out to the Gallo brothers, Larry and Joe, ambitious operators from Brooklyn, who'd been looking for opportunities to prove themselves. They weren't part of Anastasia's organization, weren't connected to Gambino directly, and were hungry enough to take a contract that would make their reputations. The critical element was the bodyguard. Anthony Coppola had protected Anastasia for 6 years, seemed absolutely loyal, had proven himself in multiple confrontations. But Gambino's people had been cultivating him for months, making an offer that combined financial incentive with survival instinct. Cooperate by being absent when the hit went down, or be killed alongside Anastasia. Coppola chose survival. He agreed to step outside the barbershop at exactly 10:20 a.m. on October 25th, claiming he needed air or coffee or any excuse that wouldn't seem suspicious. That would leave Anastasia exposed for the 3 to 5 minutes needed to execute the assassination. The weapons were selected with precision. .38 caliber revolvers, untraceable, purchased through intermediaries who couldn't connect them to Gambino or Genovese. After the shooting, they'd be wiped clean and dumped. The shooters would change clothes immediately, dispose of their outer garments, and disappear into Manhattan crowds before police could establish perimeters. On October 24th, the day before the hit, Carlo Gambino made sure he was visibly present at a restaurant in Brooklyn, surrounded by witnesses. Vito Genovese spent the day at his New Jersey estate, also creating alibis. The political cover was established. Everything was ready. October 25th, 1957, 10 a.m. to 10:22 OI. Albert Anastasia arrived at the Park Sheraton at 9:58 a.m., driven by his chauffeur, with Anthony Coppola in the passenger seat. They parked in the underground garage, took the elevator to the lobby, walked to the barbershop. Everything routine, everything normal. Joseph Bocchino greeted Anastasia warmly. He'd been cutting the boss's hair for 3 years, received generous tips, knew never to ask questions about his client's business. Anastasia settled into chair number 4, the one furthest from the entrance, positioned so he could see the room in the mirror. Bocchino draped the white cloth across Anastasia's chest, reclined the chair, began applying hot shaving cream. The radio played softly, some jazz instrumental. Another Friday morning ritual, comfortable and familiar. At 10:20 a.m., Anthony Coppola stood, told Anastasia he was stepping out briefly, and walked through the barbershop entrance. Anastasia barely acknowledged him, eyes already closing as the warm shaving cream covered his face. 2 minutes later, at 10:22 a.m., 2 men entered. Dark suits, fedoras pulled low, scarves covering the lower portions of their faces. They moved with purpose, no hesitation, no looking around, just direct movement toward chair number 4. Joseph Bocchino saw them in the mirror, saw the revolvers emerging from coat pockets, dropped his straight razor and hit the floor, already praying he'd survive whatever was about to happen. The first shot caught Anastasia in the back of the head, snapping his eyes open, shattering the peaceful morning ritual. He saw the killers in the mirror, understood instantly what was happening, lunged forward, trying to escape the chair. The next 3 shots hit him in the back as he half stood, tangled in the barber's cloth. He stumbled forward, reaching toward the mirror, like he could grab his attacker's reflections, his brain still functioning on instinct, even as bullets tore through vital organs. Shots 5 through 8 hit him as he fell. Chest, neck, shoulder, one more to the head. He collapsed onto the tiles, blood spreading in expanding pools. The final 2 shots, 9 and 10, were delivered at point-blank range as he lay dying. Insurance shots, making absolutely certain the target wouldn't survive. Professional execution, nothing left to chance. The entire assassination took 13 seconds. The shooters turned and walked calmly through the barbershop entrance, across the hotel lobby, out onto 7th Avenue. They got into a waiting black sedan that pulled away northbound, disappeared into traffic, and were never positively identified, despite an investigation that lasted 6 years. 10:23 a.m. Noon. The discovery. Joseph Bocchino emerged from behind his station, looked at Anastasia's body, and started screaming. The hotel's security responded within 90 seconds. NYPD arrived within 5 minutes. Homicide detectives were on scene within 20 minutes, securing the area, photographing the carnage, collecting shell casings. 10 bullet casings. 2 different firing positions based on trajectories, both shooters using .38 caliber revolvers. Professional hit, clearly premeditated, executed with precision. The investigators knew what they were looking at. This was an authorized Mafia execution, not some random act of violence. Anthony Coppola, the bodyguard, claimed he'd stepped outside for coffee, heard shots, ran back to find his boss dead. His story was obvious fabrication. Nobody leaves their principal unguarded in a public location. But without witnesses who could contradict him, investigators couldn't prove complicity. The media descended like locusts. By noon, mob boss slain dominated every newspaper headline. Photographers captured images of the blood-soaked barbershop, the overturned chair, the shattered mirrors. Television news interrupted regular programming with special reports. Anastasia's murder became the most famous gangland killing since the St. Valentine's Day massacre. The transition, October 25th to November 14th, 1957. Within hours of Anastasia's death, Carlo Gambino convened a meeting of the family's captains. His message was carefully calibrated. This tragedy required strong leadership. The family needed stability. Business had to continue. As underboss, he was the natural successor. Several captains loyal to Anastasia bristled at the speed of this transition. But Gambino revealed that the hit had commission approval, showed documentation, named the other bosses who'd sanctioned it. This wasn't a coup. This was official organizational business, authorized by the governing body that all families answered to. The captains faced a binary choice: accept Gambino's leadership or challenge the commission's decision. 23 of 27 pledged loyalty immediately. The other 4 disappeared over the following months, their crews absorbed, their challenges to the new order eliminated quietly. On November 14th, 1957, the commission held a meeting at Joseph Barber's estate in Apalatrine, New York. The gathering would become famous when state police raided it, arresting dozens of mobsters and exposing the Mafia's national structure to public scrutiny. But before the raid, the commission ratified Carlo Gambino as boss of his family and formally recognized the Genovese-Gambino alliance that would dominate New York for the next decade. The investigation, 1957 to 1963. The NYPD assigned 20 detectives to the Anastasia murder. The FBI opened a parallel investigation. Between them, they conducted over 800 interviews, followed countless leads, generated thousands of pages of reports. They never made a single arrest. The Gallo brothers were suspected, but never charged. Multiple witnesses reported seeing two men in dark suits, but nobody could identify them beyond generic descriptions. The getaway car was found abandoned in the Bronx, stolen that morning, wiped clean of fingerprints. Anthony Coppola was questioned repeatedly. Polygraph tests suggested deception, but without evidence directly connecting him to the plot, prosecutors couldn't charge him. He maintained his story until his death in 1989, never admitting he'd betrayed his boss. Carlo Gambino was never seriously investigated. He'd been in Brooklyn at the time, had witnesses, expressed public shock at Anastasia's murder. That he benefited from the killing was obvious. That he'd probably ordered it was suspected, proving it was impossible. The truth emerged slowly over decades, through informants who traded information for leniency. Joseph Valachi, testifying in 1963, confirmed the commission had approved the hit. Later, defectors provided additional details. But by then, statutes of limitations had expired, key witnesses were dead, and prosecution was impossible. The reign, 1957 to 1976. Carlo Gambino ruled his family for 19 years, from Anastasia's death until his own death from natural causes in 1976. His reign validated the approach that had gotten him there: patience over aggression, politics over violence, consensus over intimidation. Where Anastasia had made headlines, Gambino avoided publicity. Where Anastasia had inspired fear, Gambino inspired loyalty. Where Anastasia had acted unilaterally, Gambino built alliances. The family prospered under his leadership, becoming the most powerful and profitable of New York's 5 families. Gambino's success demonstrated that the modern mafia rewarded strategic thinking more than violent capability. The days of ruling through pure fear were ending. Federal law enforcement was becoming more sophisticated. RICO statutes were being developed. The old methods were becoming liabilities. The family that bore Gambino's name continued to dominate New York's underworld for decades after his death. Even when later bosses, like John Gotti, returned to Anastasia's flashy, violent style, they were building on the foundation Gambino had created through patience and political acumen. The legacy. October 25, 1957, taught the American Mafia a lesson that reverberated for generations. Violence, no matter how feared you are, can't protect against betrayal from within. Albert Anastasia had survived 40 years of street wars, rival families, and federal investigations. What killed him was his own underboss, working quietly for 5 years to make his murder look necessary, justified, and inevitable. The Park Sheraton Hotel changed names multiple times, became the Park Central, later the Omni, eventually another brand. The barbershop was closed, converted to other uses. But hotel staff still point out where it was, where Albert Anastasia died with shaving cream on his face and 10 bullets in his body. The barber's chair where Anastasia sat is preserved in a New York police museum. So are several of the bullet casings, the barber's cloth, photographs of the crime scene, artifacts from the moment when one of America's most feared gangsters learned that reputation doesn't stop bullets fired by men who've calculated that your death serves their purposes. Joseph Buccino, the barber who witnessed everything, never recovered psychologically. He sold his business, moved away, refused most interview requests. In one of the few statements he made, Recorded in 1982, he said, Mr. Anastasia trusted his routine, came every Friday, same time, same chair. That trust killed him. The moment you think you're safe is the moment you're most vulnerable. Carlo Gambino never publicly acknowledged ordering the hit. He ruled his family for 19 years, died peacefully in bed surrounded by family, and was given a funeral that attracted over 1,000 mourners. He'd proven that the quietest man in the room could be the most dangerous, that patience was more powerful than violence, that 10 bullets fired by others could accomplish what a lifetime of personal combat never would. Absolute power, legitimately held, universally recognized, maintained until natural death rather than violent end. 10 bullets, 13 seconds. One boss dead, another born. The lesson echoed through the decades. In the Mafia, the man you should fear isn't the one with the most bodies to his name. It's the one sitting quietly in the corner, building alliances while others build reputations, waiting 5 years for the perfect moment when 10 bullets will transform a barbershop into a throne room and an underboss into the boss of bosses.